Nikki Berry has released her highly anticipated new single, Grace and Mercy. This energizing song of praise will pick you up every time you hear it. Nikki brings dynamic vocals in this message of inspiration while shining a light on God's amazing grace and mercy. Her thought-provoking lyrics brings you to a place of pure gratefulness. Grace and Mercy is available on all digital platforms, so download it and add it to your playlist today. You can also watch the new music video on the Nikki Berry Music YouTube channel.
Grace is sufficient, oh yes, covers me in the middle of my mess. Even in the midst of a storm, only you can comfort with your loving arms. The kind of grace that lasts always.
Whether you're listening from around the world or viewing from around the world, welcome to my journey with Paula G. I am your host, Paula G, and right here is where we juggle this journey called life while walking in the gifts and the talents that God has given us. Thank you all so much for joining me. If this is your first time on the journey, welcome. We appreciate you being with us. If you are continuing on the journey, welcome back. We are so glad to have each and every one of you back. I always open the show. Y'all know this. Time is precious. It is the one thing that you cannot get back. So for you all to think it not robbery to spend your time with us here on My Journey with Paula G is truly, truly appreciated. We love it when you all are viewing in. We love the comments that we get, the text messages, the emails, the posts on social media. That lets us know that we are moving in the right direction. We also want to give a shout out to those who are choosing to join the journey through their underwriting support, and that would be our underwriters. We thank you all so much because without you, we would not have the means to have this platform to bring you all of the amazing guests that we bring you each and every episode. So thank each and every one of you for that. And if you are interested in gaining exposure for your business, your product, or your service, you can reach out to us at jerryvoicelive@gmail.com or paula@paulagvoice.com. Make sure you put underwriting opportunities in the subject line, and we will be sure to follow up with you. Also, stay connected. Paula G Voice, I tried to make it easy. Paula G Voice across all platforms. Connect with us as we continue to embrace the journey. Well, today on this episode, I want to expand a bit on Paula's perspective. You know, usually before we have a guest come on, I always share with you a bit of Paula's perspective. So I want to do that today, but I also want to expand a bit on Paula's perspective because we are in a new era. We are in a new age. There has been a shift in the atmosphere, a shift like we have never seen before. So I want to elaborate on that a bit. But before I do that, I want to share with you a little bit from my book, which I'm so proud of. My Journey to Lady Wisdom After Midnight. It can be found on your normal platforms. And I want to share a little bit. This is chapter 2, and it's entitled My Thought Journey. And this kind of ties in with what we're going to talk about a little bit today. I always thought about what it would be like. I always thought about pursuing my dream, but I never did because you can fill in the blank, right? I'm sure you all could fill in the blank. Your dreams, your goals, your passions are just thoughts, or are they? Miles Monroe once said the richest place on the planet is the cemetery. So many have gone to the graves, having only thought about pursuing their dreams. They never acted on those thoughts. You today must start. Start today by turning those thoughts into action so we as a people can begin to bankrupt the cemetery. And I want to stop right there because that kind of ties in with what I wanted to talk to you all about today. If you've been with me for a while, you know I had this phrase about the greatest conversation that you will ever have is the one that takes place in between your ears because it really changes the trajectory of your life. What it is that you speak over yourself, what it is that you speak to yourself, what it is that you believe that you are able to do. It all starts with that conversation in between your ears. You can have the best training, school education, all sorts of degrees. You can have the resources, you can have the finances, whatever it is you need. But if that conversation in between your ears is not one that projects you into that direction that you're wanting to go in to fulfill those dreams, to fulfill those goals, for all of those things to manifest, then it's not going to happen. And in the day and age that we're in right now, we are really looking at a time of shifting, which we are in the process of this shift. The way that we used to do things and the way that we're doing things now are so different. We've come through a time that none of us in this lifetime have seen before. And it requires that conversation in between our ears. It requires us to make a shift in order for us to fulfill those dreams, in order for us to continue to stay relevant, in order for us to move forward, in order for us to stay engaged, employed in some instances. We really have to make a shift. We've come through a season that has changed our lives forever. We've come through a season in which we've lost a lot of family and friends. We've had a lot of loss. And there have been a lot of negatives in this particular season. But you hear all the time about, you always have to extract the positive from a negative situation. You always have to find the positive, the rainbow after the storm. You have to find the positive in each and every situation. We have this phrase, I say it sometimes, about keeping hope alive. That's how you keep hope alive, is finding the positive and looking and seeing what it is that you can do or what it is that you have to do differently. Because y'all have heard me say this, as long as you are living and breathing, it's never too late to be what you might have been. As long as you're living and breathing, it is never too late to do those things that you desire to do, to continue to do those things that you were doing before, that you loved doing, but you're now having to make a shift. And in this season that we're coming through, we're seeing our lives have changed, what employment looks like. Prior to this particular season, a lot of you were going to work, 9 to 5 jobs. In some instances, you were going, it was a 12-hour day, whatever the shift was, a day shift, a night shift, a graveyard shift. You were getting up every day, you were going to work, dropping the children off at school, dropping the children off at the daycare center, heading to work, picking up something at the gas station, a snack or coffee, getting gas, heading to work, grinding all day at this job, coming home in the evening, maybe picking something up for dinner because, who has time to cook when you're working those hours, dropping the children off to soccer, coming home in the evening, doing homework, waking up with the children, waking up and starting all over again. And really, in the case of a two-family household, the husband was working, the wife was working, you both were working to make ends meet. You both were working to support the household. But in the process of this season that we've come through, some of you have made a shift. Some of you have realized some things. Some of you have seen some changes. And when the world stopped, there was a shift. And I can remember when we first started this television show, we were in studio. And shouts out to Jerry Voice Live, Positive Power 21, for his vision on my journey, his vision for this particular television show. I'm so grateful to him for that. But he had this vision, and he had this vision of what this would look like. And based on that vision, y'all have heard me say it before, right? Write the vision, make it plain, write the plan. He came up with this plan of what this show was going to look like. And we taped these episodes. We were going to go into studio, which we did. You go into studio, you book these guests, you have these guests that come to the studio to record the shows, one after the other. We used to do a whole season in one weekend. It was grueling. It was grueling, y'all, but it was wonderful. It was rewarding because you got to meet all of these people. And we would go in the studio and we would record show after show after show. And the guests would come in from all parts of the country to record these episodes. And we were rolling right along, and it was just a beautiful journey. And then the pandemic hit, and everything came to a halt. Our journey came to a halt. Your journey came to a halt. Our lives came to a halt. We couldn't go to work, couldn't go to school, couldn't record our shows. You couldn't take the children to the, different activities that you normally take the children to. Everything stopped. And for a moment there, we were kind of bewildered. We weren't sure what was going on. We weren't sure what to do. It was something that was new to us, and many of us were doing our best to navigate that, not only for ourselves mentally, but for those that were in the homes with us, our families, our parents, or children, what have you. It was a challenging time for a lot of people. It was a very challenging time. But then as things began to open again, well, let me back up a little bit. During that time, some of us began to engage in things that we had not engaged in before. Prior to the pandemic, a lot of us, this particular platform, this remote platform, a lot of it was foreign to a lot of us. And a lot of us had to learn how to navigate. The children were going to school virtually. So we had to kind of learn the technology, not kind of, but we did have to learn the technology in order for our children to stay engaged because they were now learning remotely. And I don't know if you ever had a chance to see the remote classroom with all the children on the screen and the teacher up there in the corner. It was a challenge for both families learning how to navigate the computer, some having to get another computer, some having to change their internet service. There were a lot of changes, and some of us really struggled through those. Some of us navigated well, but others struggled through perhaps because of lack of resources, but also perhaps struggled through because of perhaps the reluctance to make that shift, that mental shift. And this is how things used to be. And I'm not one to change. I don't like a whole lot of change. And now you're telling me I've got to do this virtually, or I've got to do this remotely via the internet, and I've got to learn how to use the computer in this way. And I'm just not even gonna fool with it. I know some of us said that. Some of us said that. But there were a lot of us that realized in order to keep up with the relevance of what was going on in our ever-changing times, that we had to make some changes. And in life, as long as we are I say this all the time, as long as we're living and breathing, change is going to occur. We've seen one like we have never seen before. It was a shift, and the shift is continuing because we're having to continue to evolve as these seasons continue to move forward and the changes in our lives. And some of those changes that occurred during our pandemic season, we're technically still in a pandemic, even though things are open and so forth, but we're still finding ourselves having to continue to evolve and continue to learn. So that conversation in between our ears has changed to where I've got to, and in some instances you don't have a choice. In order to stay relevant and in order to keep up with the times, we've got to make that change, that mindset change, and that I've got to learn new skills. I've got to learn new techniques. I've got to learn new technology, whether I like it or not, whether I'm tech savvy or not. I'm preaching to myself. We've got to learn these things because some of the changes that have occurred during this last season are now pretty much permanent. We've gotten used to certain things. We've gotten comfortable with certain things. Some of us may not necessarily want to go back to the old way of doing things. The world constantly is changing and we must change with it. But it doesn't have to be a negative thing. It doesn't have to be a negative thing. For us here, Positive Power, for us here, this show, the shift, the change for us has opened doors to where we would have been able to entertain guests that we otherwise might not have had the opportunity to entertain because of the logistics, because we were where in studio, in person, which is great. I love being in studio. I love talking to all the guests in studio and meeting all of them personally and individually. But now where we're remote, we still have that opportunity. It's not quite the same. We still have that opportunity, but we also have the opportunity to engage with guests, with men and women around the world that we would not have otherwise had that opportunity. But the only reason that we're able to engage in that is because we made that shift. We knew we had to make that shift. And whatever it is that you are desiring to do or that you're doing, shifting that mindset has to be a part of that journey. And I know it's hard because some of us are coming are kicking and screaming. Nah, I'm old school. I'm set in my ways. But we've got to continue to move forward and making these shifts. The work environment has changed. Some of us have not gone back to work life the way that it was before. We've got a lot of moms that are working from home who have made the shift, and families who have realized, wait a minute, both of us are working. And now that we're home, the money that we save on the different aspects of working outside of the home, maybe we can make ends meet on one income, or maybe we can make ends meet on one income while the other one pursues their goals and their dreams. Or maybe we can make ends meet pursuing our goals and dreams and the finances that generates. So a lot of our eyes have been opened in that what we thought we had to do may not have necessarily been the case. But it comes again with that shift, learning technology, learning new things, being willing to learn and to be open to change. It is frightening sometimes. Lord knows when I started this whole change and learning the technology, oh my gosh, it was frustrating. It was frustrating. I'm preaching to myself. It was frustrating. You are not alone. It may be frustrating, but in order for us to move forward, we've got to be prayerful, asking God to show us how to do things, asking God to open these doors of opportunity for us, asking God to help us along this particular journey. Because it can be a frustrating journey, but it can also be an exciting journey. As we journey through life, God takes us through so many different aspects. He takes us through so many different peaks and valleys, and so many of us have come through this. We've come through this. We're here. We are living. We're breathing. We're healthy. We've made it through this point. So we've got to extract all of those positives out of that and decide for ourselves, what does this new world look like as a result of these shifts, as a result of where we are today? What is it that I need to do differently? Changing my mindset, realizing that I can learn how to do things differently. I can learn new ways of doing things differently. I may not necessarily like doing it sometimes. We don't. But learning how to do things differently. If we've got to take a class, so be it. If we've got to get on YouTube and figure out how to do it, but coming up with ways to figure out how to embrace your new norm, how to manage this shift that we are in, because the shift definitely has occurred as a result of this last season. And what does that look like for us? They say when someone gives you lemons, make lemonade. This is kind of that analogy. It's time to make some lemonade. And how are we going to go about that? How are we going to do that? Technology, I can't say that enough, that technology is the area where, being in the season that we're in now, like this technology season is even changing from when we first were at the beginning of the pandemic, and what that looked like, and what we had to learn to do, and what we have to learn to do now, and how we have to learn to do things differently. And it's part of the evolution in life, as well, as because as you've grown from childhood to adulthood, and wherever you are in adulthood, how you've grown, and as you've grown, you have evolved. You have had to learn how to do things differently. In each phase of your life, you've had to learn a new skill. You've had to take things to another level, as we say sometimes. And you've had to perhaps step outside of your comfort zone. And that's another thing, that going through this season that we're going through now, it really requires us to step outside of our comfort zone, whether we like it or not, simply because of the shift that we're in and the season that we're in. But stepping outside of your comfort zone is not a bad place to be. It really is not a bad place to be, because outside, I can't remember who said it, but someone once said that stepping outside of your comfort zone is where you find the growth. Stepping outside of your comfort zone is where you're able to accomplish those things that you desire, or your dreams. Your dreams can't necessarily be accomplished inside of that bubble that we operate in. It requires some courage. It requires stepping out and stretching ourselves, stepping out to the point where we've done all that we can do, or all that we feel we're capable of doing, and trusting that God will do the rest. Even for myself on this journey, as we evolved from being in the studio to uh, doing these shows remotely, it was a leap outside of my comfort zone on different aspects, especially with the technology part. I know I've talked a lot about the technology part, but for me on this journey, that was the shift. So I really had to kind of put my big girl pants on and learn what I needed to learn in order to do what it is that I'm doing in this particular season. And I'm telling you, if I can do it, you all can do it as well. If I can do it, you all can do it. I know it can be frightening sometimes. I know it can be frightening, but you know what? That's where your faith comes in. And that's where prayer comes in, asking, Lord, I've reached this point. I'm not quite sure how to do this. I'm afraid to step outside of my comfort zone. I've always done things this way. Life, society is forcing me to step out with this shift that's going on, with this shift in what employment looks like, and what employees are looking, or employers are looking for. All of these things are shifting. How can I keep up? How can I stay relevant? Lord showed me, open the doors of opportunity. Give me the wherewithal, the courage, the wisdom, the discernment, in order for me to keep up with these shifts, in order for me to remain relevant in the workforce, because the workforce has forever changed. Helping me to understand how to navigate these different things that I now have to learn how to do in order for me to stay engaged in the game, relevant. Our communication now has is becomes a challenge, because everything is, well, not everything, but a lot of things are virtual now, and for some, the communication skills, the social skills have evolved, shall we say. And that in itself becomes a challenge as well, how we communicate with each other, how we interact with each other. The social distancing is beginning to kind of, beginning to see some of the residuals of that as well, but that looks differently. That looks different. So our communication skills, and how we communicate with each other, our social skills, how we communicate when we actually do see people in person, as well as virtually, all of these things we have to consider, we have to think about, and you may have been thinking about them all along, and you may have felt overwhelmed, and you may have felt all alone, like, I can't, this is just too much for me. But please know that you're not alone, that we're all, as they say, we're all in this together, but we are truly all on this journey together. And it can be a very exciting journey, learning these new things, learning how to do things differently, even in our churches. Now, we have so many remote platforms. We have individuals that are coming back to the church, but we have some that may not necessarily be coming back to the church. So it is incumbent upon our pastors to also make some shifts and some changes, and to integrate technology and all of these things into their ministry and what it is that they're doing. So I hope that encouraged you today. We have come to the end of the journey today. I'd like to thank you all for joining us, thanking our underwriters for your underwriting support. Make sure you stay engaged. Paula G Voice across all social media platforms. And if you're interested in being an underwriter, you can email jerryvoicelive@gmail.com, as well as paula@paulagvoice.com. And remember, the greatest conversation that you will ever have is the one that takes place in between your ears. It is time for a shift. What are you speaking to yourself? God better be a part of that conversation, and you better be listening to his still small voice as we continue to juggle this journey called life while walking in the gifts and talents that God has given us in a new season that has shifted. Until next time, embrace the journey.